Hello and welcome back to our film discussion. This week we're talking about John Lewis, Good Trouble, and it's a documentary about John Lewis, who is currently a congressman and was a major figure and leader during the civil rights movement. So Kelly, what did you think?
I mean, I'm already like I fangirl about John Lewis all the time. So so I was actually super excited to watch this documentary. I actually worked for an advocacy organization that did some close work with him in Congress, and so I never actually got to meet him, which was sad.
Oh,
But I always felt like very adjacent to him, and just I have so much respect for the work he's done in Congress, and then of course all of the work he did as part of the civil rights movement. So I was really excited about this documentary just to learn more about him and all that. And I really liked it. It was pretty much your standard documentary biography of a well known figure. But what I appreciated about this was the interviews with his family.
mm-hmm.
Talked about, what a great family member he is and what a great guy he is. And just all these funny, like, family stories that they shared. And then just a lot of the intimate moments with him I just thought were just really lovely. And it really felt like sitting in a room with him and getting to like get his reflections on his life and all of that kind of stuff. So it was it was a pretty basic documentary. I mean, it had a pretty basic documentary um, trajectory and all of
Structure.
that. I don't know if I learned anything about him I didn't know. Like I said, I was already a big fangirl, so I'm not sure I learned that much new stuff. But I really, really enjoyed just the feeling of being walked through his life by him and his reflections and that kind of thing. And it was just warm and lovely. And yeah, so I enjoyed it for that reason. How about you, Phoebe?
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the more human moments that they captured in the documentary, I thought it really like there were so many moments that just brought out his humor and things that you don't really think about as being important to somebody who's so accomplished already and so like has done so many wonderful things to affect the progress in the country. But like it's great to see just that side of him as well, being like just a kind of a humorous like old guy and getting along with his staffers and different people who are coming up to him. And it was nice to see those human moments. And I learned a lot about his background as well. I didn't know about that he had grown up on a farm picking cotton, and that he like the chicken stories that I liked the obsession with chickens that he had, and telling the story about ministering.
There's actually a book, I think it's called Preaching to the Chickens. It's
Oh,
meant for kids and it's about John Lewis's life, which is part of why I know so much about his life because I've read that book to my daughter.
oh,
And
that's
so, yeah,
cool.
it's all about how he grew up preaching to the chickens, which I think was such a funny thing that they used throughout the documentary, right? Is him going
Yeah.
back to talking about preaching to the chickens.
I do wish that there had been more information, honestly. Like I think going through it was a little bit choppy in the way that they edited it, so that it was like it started a bit with the history, and then it would go into some very current things, and then it would go back to history. And there was it didn't feel wrong, but I think that I would have liked to stay in one of those for longer. Like stay in the history for a bit more time, stay in the current day for a bit more time.
I think it needed like more signposts throughout the documentary, like stop. And I don't know if you watched Two Streets that we showed and did the virtual community conversation around, but they had like part one, this issue, part two, this issue. And I kind of, after watching the John Lewis documentary, it was like, oh, that first bit was about civil rights, and then the second bit was about voter rights, and so it went back in his history, why this was important, how it led to him in Congress, and then it just went whoop, back, and then it was like voting rights, why voting rights were so important, and went through that, and then it was like whoop, like, and Barack Obama and how that like all how
Right.
he impacted lots of people running for office and Barack Obama and all that kind of stuff. So it felt cohesive, but I think if they had just paused and been like, voting rights or some sort of
Yeah.
like just now we're going to switch gears and talk about another issue or something would have just, I think that alone would have been like, oh, okay, now we're going backwards for that reason, instead of feeling like, whoa, we just went back in time, what happened?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think they did do a good job of kind of using this jumping back and forth in editing style as like a way to draw parallels between what's currently happening and what was happening then. And he keeps repeating like, I'm worried about democracy right now. And clearly, because he was fighting for voting rights back then, that's also what he was worried about at that point. So it does draw a lot of parallels. And the civil rights movement itself, watching footage of people being horribly mistreated and beaten by cops and even other citizens who just hated black people. It's really sad to watch that, and then to also think about, wow, things haven't changed that much, and it's hard to think about these parallels and how much they're still relevant.
Definitely. I thought the documentary, that style of going back and forth, was a really good way to show how things have changed, but also to highlight what hasn't. And
Exactly.
so I think honestly it was interesting to watch again in this current moment. Like, this release was planned long before the George Floyd um, murder and all of that. So it's interesting to think about, this film was already ready to go, and it so spoke to, I feel like, the current moment we're in. um, but yeah, I think it was a hard thing to watch a little bit in this current moment, just to realize like, wow, we've made a ton of progress, and in a lot of ways like we haven't. And using his life to really demonstrate that and show like he was fighting for voter rights then, and he's fighting for voting rights now. And his whole life, and it made me, I think he's an amazing human being, and so it's amazing to see what he has achieved in his lifetime. But it also made me so sad that he's reaching his older years, and like, will he see all the stuff he's fought for his whole life? I mean, they made a point of talking about like, he got into this at 15, like he started
Right.
getting arrested and civil disobedience at 15.
And he's 80 now.
Yeah, and so like really this really really long fight for civil rights and equality and everything, and it just, I don't know, it was one of those things that, to me at least, I wanted to see the uplifting side, is like, he's fought for so long and we can do this because people like him have showed us how. And that was really, to me, the part of the documentary. I especially love the end. I think it was a reunion of all of his staffers or something. And he started again with the preaching to the chicken story that like all of his staffers could recite with him, which was really funny. But I just loved his whole thing of like, I'm this old dude, like I've been fighting, but like, consider the mantle passed, and like, this is your fight now, and like, you got to go out and do this. And it was just the warmth in that room, and all of these young people who he has mentored, and his impact has exponentially multiplied, and they're there, and they're ready to keep fighting in Congress and wherever they
Right.
are. And
Yeah, and we see these young, like Democratic freshmen, representatives and Congress people who are talking about how he has been a direct inspiration for their progressive politics and their want to fight for the same kinds of things that he was.
oh
And so
yeah.
that was really nice to see as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I especially love the moment where he talks about Barack Obama's inauguration, and the minute it ended, he turned around to John Lewis and said, "It's because of you, John." And like, that made me want to cry. I mean, it was,
Right.
and then he was crying while he was saying it. It was just really lovely. So I mean, I don't know. It's that the sad side is how little it feels like we've progressed since he was a 15-year-old, and then at the same time seeing the army of young people that he has inspired, just this huge group of young people. I mean, I would consider myself in that group, just young people that he's really inspired and fired up and shown us what it means to fight for what you believe in. And as he said to everybody, he's like, this sometimes it's good to get in trouble, good trouble.
Yeah.
And I love
It's
that
a
was
great
the title of the
philosophy.
documentary. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you had to rate this, I know this is going to be a really hard one to rate, but what would you give it out of 5 stars?
Okay. I mean, while it was a pretty basic documentary structure, I think the warmth and the meaning that it communicated was really, I don't know, it hit me as pretty profound. So while it was a pretty, standard documentary style, I don't know if I'd give it like 5 stars for style, but definitely for the intimacy and the hope and inspiration it communicated. I think I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I mean, I just really felt like, I don't know, it brought me down, and then it ended with a like, go now, go do, in the spirit of John Lewis, and I really, like, I don't know, that was something I needed to hear right now. And so I think it just spoke to me where I was in the moment. And so I'll give it a 4 out of 5 stars. How about you, Phoebe?
Yeah, I would say probably like a 3.5 out of 5, just because while I thought that the subject material was obviously fantastic, I do think that I didn't really like a lot of the editing choices that they made, and I think that they didn't really come across as well. Like, I like the idea behind it, but I think it could have been done a little bit better. And I'm just focusing more on the technical side of things, because documentaries are very difficult to to really like pin down as far as the content. I think it's coming directly out of the mouths of these people, so I think that I think it did really well in the content area. But yeah, for the technical aspect of the editing and everything, which I am very critical of as an editor myself, I think that part was that was the one part I really took down some stars for.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that I really did appreciate about it is I feel like sometimes when I see documentaries about older people, the documentaries feel old. And this one did, because they had so much energy from like AOC and Ayanna Presley, and like all of those young people that he's fired up. There was just this energy. And I mean, even his chief of staff that was always next to him, this young guy.
Oh, yeah.
Who were just like, I don't know, he looked like he was always just like, oh my God, I work for John Lewis, like the whole time.
And they had such a cute relationship. I really liked seeing the scenes between them.
It was very cute. It was very cute. And like, so I think the focus of the documentary on all the young people he's inspired really gave the documentary just like a whole lot of energy that I don't see in other documentaries about people like John Lewis that are older. And it's like, look at their contribution. Let's talk about their contribution. And I think because they were so focused on his contribution was firing up all of these young people. And they are the future and they're going to carry on this fight. Just, it had this newer, I mean, and they even sometimes they used some music from the, 60s civil rights movement, but a lot of it was new music. And so I liked that, like telling the civil rights story with newer music, and it just brought an energy to those scenes that you don't see in other documentaries. So that will be my one like kudos to the filmmaking is they did manage to take, what could have been just like blah blah blah, his life, what an inspiration he is. And they managed to just charge it with all of this incredible energy.
It never felt dry throughout the movie. It was very very interesting to watch. I never was losing interest in it. I just felt kind of whiplashed a little often when it was like, oh, I really like to hear more about this subject, and then it would just whoosh into a completely different topic.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah. I think it's really good if you want to learn more about John Lewis. I think this is a fantastic way to do it. Thank you so much, Kelly, for talking to me.
Yeah, thank you, Phoebe.
And we'll see you guys on the next one.